a rude sheriff humiliated a poor native girl in public until a cowboy came to her rescue. For most townspeople, it was just another ordinary morning. But for Leela Redfeather, a young native girl with long dark hair braided down her back, this morning was anything but ordinary. Leela had woken early, before the sun peeked over the hills. She carefully gathered the baskets she had woven the night before. Each one was sturdy and beautifully crafted, a testament to her patience and skill. Her family depended on her little business to buy food and other necessities. Life had not been easy for Leela's family. Her father worked as a laborer in the fields, and her mother spent her days weaving and teaching Leela the traditions of their people. Despite the hardships, Leela carried herself with quiet pride, believing that hard work and honesty could earn her a good life. As she walked toward the town market, she noticed the usual sights and sounds: merchants setting up their stalls, children chasing one another across the street, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifting from Mrs. Cartwright's bakery. Leela loved these small moments, the ordinary pieces of life that made the town feel alive. She arranged her baskets neatly, displaying them in a small wooden stall near the center of the market. She hoped that today would bring a few customers, enough to make her family proud and secure a little extra for the week. But the quiet of the morning was broken by the loud, gruff voice of Sheriff Clayton. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed permanently set in a scowl. Clayton took pride in his authority, but many whispered that he enjoyed showing it off more than he enjoyed justice. His boots clattered against the wooden planks of the market as he approached, and townsfolk instinctively stepped aside. Leela felt a twinge of anxiety, but she straightened her back and forced a smile, determined not to let fear show. Sheriff Clayton stopped in front of her stall, squinting at her baskets. "What do we have here?" he barked, his tone dripping with mockery. "Little girl thinks she can make money selling these toys." He waved a hand dismissively, sending a slight tremor through the baskets. A few townspeople chuckled nervously, unsure whether to intervene. Leela's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she held her ground. "They're not toys, sir. They're baskets. I made them myself," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear tightening in her chest. She hoped her words would earn a shred of respect, but the sheriff's eyes narrowed and a cruel smile spread across his face. "A native girl selling baskets," he sneered. "What will this town come to if we let this happen? Everyone should know their place." He leaned closer, his voice lowering so that only those nearby could hear. "Maybe I should confiscate these and teach you a lesson." She could hear the whispers of the crowd, some mocking, some uncertain. Mothers pulled their children close, and men who usually would have spoken up stayed silent. Leela's hands trembled slightly, but she refused to look away. Her heart pounded, not only from fear but from a growing anger at the injustice of it all. As the sheriff continued his tirade, Leela tried to shrink smaller, wishing the ground would open beneath her feet. But just as her hopes seemed to fade, a tall figure appeared at the edge of the market square. He moved with calm confidence, yet his presence immediately drew attention. Caleb Dawson, a cowboy who had recently arrived in town, had a reputation for fairness and courage, though he rarely involved himself in the town's daily disputes. His wide-brimmed hat shaded a determined face, and his hands rested lightly near the belt of his holster, a subtle but unmistakable sign that he was ready for anything. Caleb paused, observing the scene carefully. He saw Leela standing with quiet defiance and the sheriff, who seemed to take perverse pleasure in humiliating her. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had seen injustice before, and he knew it when he saw it. Without a word, he took a few deliberate steps closer, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. The sheriff noticed Caleb and scoffed. "And who are you supposed to be?" he demanded. "Another busybody coming to meddle." No one had dared to speak to Sheriff Clayton in this manner before. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. Children peeked from behind their parents, curious to see what would happen next. Even the market merchants paused, utensils and goods in hand, sensing that something important was unfolding. The sheriff's face darkened, his pride wounded by Caleb's calm confrontation. "And what makes you think you can tell me what to do?" he barked. But his voice wavered slightly, betraying uncertainty. Caleb took a step forward. "Because it's wrong to humiliate someone for trying to earn an honest living. It's wrong to make her feel small in front of everyone. That's not what a sheriff should do." Leela's eyes widened slightly, a spark of hope flickering inside her chest. For the first time that day, she felt someone truly saw her, someone willing to stand up for her without fear. Sheriff Clayton shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain control. He opened his mouth to reply, but the murmurs of the townspeople began to grow louder. "He's right," one woman whispered. "You shouldn't treat her like that." Another man nodded, murmuring agreement. The sheriff's scowl deepened, but the support for Leela was beginning to tip the balance. Leela's heart pounded, not just from fear but from the strange mix of relief and gratitude. Caleb's presence gave her courage, reminding her that she was not powerless. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, standing taller than she had all morning. The sheriff finally took a step back, his confidence shaken by the crowd's subtle shift. He muttered something under his breath, and though it was inaudible, the townspeople understood it as a retreat. Caleb gave Leela a small nod, a silent reassurance that he would not let her face the sheriff's cruelty alone. As the sheriff stomped away, muttering and glaring, Leela exhaled slowly, her body relaxing for the first time since the morning began. She looked at Caleb, who gave her a warm, encouraging smile. "You don't deserve that," he said simply. "No one does." Leela's hands shook slightly as she arranged her baskets again, but her smile returned, this time tinged with confidence. She noticed Caleb lingering nearby, keeping an eye on the market and her stall without intruding. His presence was steadying, like an invisible shield. Children peeked curiously at her baskets, and a few cautious customers began to approach. Leela's voice, soft yet confident, guided them as she described her work. Each sale, each polite exchange strengthened her resolve. She realized that even after humiliation, life continued and dignity could be reclaimed, one small act at a time. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Leela felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had endured public humiliation and had discovered something unexpected. Allies could appear in the most unlikely of places, and courage could come from both within and outside oneself. As she looked across the market, she saw Caleb tipping his hat slightly, acknowledging her quietly. Leela returned the gesture with a small nod, a silent promise that she would remember this day, not for the humiliation she suffered, but for the courage and kindness she witnessed. It was a morning that began with shame and fear, but it ended with hope. And though the challenges of life would not disappear, Leela Redfeather now carried within her the knowledge that no one could take away her dignity as long as she held on to courage, and as long as there were people like Caleb willing to stand for what was right. After the morning's tense events, Cedar Creek began to settle into its usual rhythm. The market grew noisier as merchants called out to customers, children laughed and ran between stalls, and the scent of fresh bread, roasting coffee, and warm pies filled the air. Yet, for Leela Redfeather, the world felt a little different. Something inside her had shifted. The humiliation she had endured earlier still lingered, but now it was tempered with hope, courage, and the quiet strength that came from knowing someone like Caleb Dawson cared. Caleb had remained nearby throughout the morning, his calm presence a steady anchor amidst the whispers and sideways glances of the townspeople. When Leela glanced up, she saw him standing a few yards away, leaning against a post with his arms crossed, watching the market with sharp, attentive eyes. There was a reassuring confidence about him, a quiet sense of justice that seemed to make the air around him steadier. After a few moments of hesitation, Leela gathered her courage and walked over to him. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the market. "For what you did, I don't know if anyone else would have said anything. No one deserves that, especially not a young girl working hard to support her family." "It hurt more than I expected." Caleb's presence gave Leela a sense of protection she hadn't felt before, yet she noticed he never overstepped. He wasn't trying to overshadow her or take control. He simply walked beside her, offering support and strength when she needed it most. As they returned to her stall, a few curious townspeople lingered, whispering and casting glances in their direction. Some seemed impressed by Caleb's courage, while others still hesitated, unsure how to react. Leela felt a surge of determination. She straightened her back and greeted a young couple approaching her stall with a polite smile, explaining the uses of her handmade baskets. Her confidence grew with each interaction, and soon more customers began to take notice, drawn not just by her goods but by her quiet dignity. But the day was far from over. Word of the morning's incident had reached Sheriff Clayton, and his pride had not recovered. Though he tried to maintain his composure, whispers of his humiliation followed him wherever he went. He muttered under his breath as he passed merchants and townsfolk, noticing the subtle looks of disapproval. Though no one confronted him directly, the sense of collective judgment weighed heavily on him, and his anger simmered just beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Caleb continued to stay close to Leela. He didn't speak much, but his presence was enough to give her courage. At one point, a group of boys from the town tried to sneak around the stall, making rude comments about Leela's heritage and attempting to knock over a basket. Before she could react, Caleb's voice rang out, calm but firm. "Hey, leave her alone. She's working hard to earn an honest living. You don't get to mock her or interfere." He wasn't loud or reckless. He was measured, precise, and effective. As the morning moved into afternoon, the two began talking more. Caleb shared stories from his travels, tales of dusty plains, quiet rivers, and small towns much like Cedar Creek. Leela listened with rapt attention, feeling a connection she had never experienced before. There was a gentleness in his voice, a calmness that made her feel safe, and a wisdom that made her think differently about the challenges she faced. "You know," Caleb said at one point, "life isn't always fair. People will try to tear you down just like that sheriff did. But that doesn't mean you stop trying. It doesn't mean you give up." "It's hard to remember that sometimes," she admitted. "When everyone seems against you, it feels like you're all alone." A hot breeze swept through the streets, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers from the hills surrounding the town. Leela looked around and noticed a few people lingering, observing quietly. She realized that Caleb's courage had not only helped her, it had started to shift the town's mood. People who had once laughed or whispered were now watching with respect, curious about this quiet, steadfast boy from elsewhere who had dared to stand up to the sheriff. The afternoon continued with a slow but steady flow of customers. Leela's baskets sold steadily, and with each sale, her confidence grew. She realized that she was capable of handling more than she had ever imagined. And throughout it all, Caleb remained nearby, offering quiet guidance, a reassuring smile, or a subtle warning glance when necessary. At one point, a traveling merchant approached Leela, complimenting the craftsmanship of her baskets. "These are finely made," he said. "I don't see many girls your age who can work like this. Keep it up. I've worked hard to learn from my family and our traditions." As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Cedar Creek, Leela's thoughts drifted back to the morning's events. She realized that humiliation and fear could be overcome with courage and support. She also realized that people like Caleb existed, people who would stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Just as she began to pack up her remaining baskets, Caleb approached her. "It's been a long day," he said, his voice calm. "How are you holding up?" "Sometimes it's about knowing when to accept help and when to stand on your own. Today, you did a little of both." Despite the hardships she faced, despite the harsh words and cruel actions of others, she knew that courage, dignity, and kindness could still shine through. As Caleb tipped his hat and prepared to leave, Leela felt a sudden surge of determination. Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked hesitantly. Caleb paused, looking at her with a warm smile. "I'll be around," he said. And don't worry, you're stronger than you think. Just keep standing tall and don't let anyone make you feel small. As the evening settled over Cedar Creek, Leela packed up the last of her baskets and began the walk home. Her steps were lighter, her heart braver, and her mind full of new determination. She knew that tomorrow might bring new difficulties, new whispers, and maybe even another encounter with Sheriff Clayton. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. She had survived humiliation. She had found courage, and she had discovered that even in a town full of judgment, one person's kindness and bravery could make all the difference in the world. The next morning, Cedar Creek woke to the same dusty streets, the same wooden buildings, and the soft light of the rising sun stretching across the town square. But for Leela Redfeather, the day felt different. The humiliation she had endured yesterday lingered in her memory, yet it no longer felt as heavy. The thought of Caleb Dawson, who had stood up for her so courageously, gave her a sense of comfort she had never known. She felt ready to face whatever the day might bring, even if it meant seeing the sheriff again. Leela carefully arranged her baskets at her stall, placing the largest ones at the front and stacking the smaller, delicate ones on top. Each basket was a piece of her hard work and skill, and she wanted to present them with care. The townspeople were beginning to notice her resilience. A few who had watched the events of yesterday now nodded politely as they passed, showing a quiet respect that had not existed before. Caleb appeared not long after, walking slowly through the market with the ease of someone who belonged anywhere but belonged nowhere in particular. He tipped his hat to Leela, giving her a small, encouraging smile. "Morning," he said calmly. "Looks like it's going to be a busy day. But it never hurts to have a friend on your side." It was clear to him that the sheriff's presence in the town had been a source of tension for Leela, and he intended to make sure she wasn't subjected to humiliation again. As the sun climbed higher, the calm was broken by the sound of heavy boots clattering against the wooden planks of the market. Sheriff Clayton had returned. His face was red with anger, his pride clearly bruised by the previous day's events. He strode purposefully toward Leela's stall, eyes scanning the crowd as if daring anyone to challenge him. Leela felt her stomach tighten, but this time she did not shrink. She met the sheriff's gaze with a quiet determination, and when her eyes met Caleb's, she felt a renewed sense of courage. Caleb, sensing the tension in the air, stepped slightly closer to Leela, his presence a silent shield. "Back again, I see," the sheriff said, his voice low but dripping with irritation. "Still trying to sell these trinkets? Don't you have better things to do?" "I am doing nothing wrong." "No one is above the law," he said, "but the law also protects the innocent. Harassing a young girl for selling baskets is not justice, it's cruelty." Others whispered to each other, acknowledging that the sheriff's behavior was no longer beyond question. Leela felt a surge of hope. She realized that Caleb's courage had not only given her strength, but it had also begun to influence the town. People were beginning to see that the sheriff's pride and harshness could be challenged. And while she still feared the sheriff's temper, she also felt the power of standing firm with someone who believed in her. Sheriff Clayton's voice rose in frustration. "You dare speak to me like that? You both of you will regret this. That is your choice, but it is not justice." Sensing an opportunity to protect Leela further, Caleb stepped closer to her, speaking in a low, reassuring voice. "Stay calm," he said. "I've got your back." The sheriff, frustrated and humiliated, finally turned on his heel and stomped away, muttering threats that no one paid attention to. The crowd slowly dispersed, returning to their stalls and conversations, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a new respect for Leela and for the cowboy who had stood up for her. For the rest of the day, Caleb stayed nearby, ensuring that no further harassment occurred. He helped Leela adjust her stall, carried baskets that were too heavy for her alone, and quietly warned off anyone who seemed inclined to cause trouble. His support was steady, never overbearing, and Leela felt an unfamiliar sense of security and pride. As the afternoon wore on, Leela began to talk more openly with Caleb about her life. She told him stories of her family, the struggles they faced, and the traditions she hoped to carry forward. Caleb listened intently, never interrupting, offering only small, thoughtful comments that encouraged her to keep speaking. Leela felt heard in a way she had never experienced before. "You have a strong spirit," Caleb said at one point, smiling. "I've seen many people give up when the world treats them unfairly, but you keep moving forward. You don't have to face everything alone. Opportunities like this don't come often," he said, "but you'll have to weigh what's best for you and your family. Whatever you decide, I know you'll do it with courage." She had discovered that courage could take many forms: standing firm, seeking support, and helping others in turn. And she had discovered that Caleb Dawson was not just a stranger passing through. He was someone who could be trusted, someone who believed in doing what was right, no matter the risk. When the market finally closed, Caleb helped Leela pack her remaining baskets. The day had been long, but it had also been transformative. Leela realized that she had grown stronger, not just because of her own efforts, but because she had someone willing to stand beside her. "Thank you," she said again, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you today. You're stronger than you think, but I'm glad I could help." The evening air was cool and fragrant with the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Birds sang quietly in the trees, and the distant hills glowed with the warm light of the setting sun. Leela realized that, though challenges would continue to come, she was no longer afraid to face them. With courage in her heart and allies by her side, she could stand tall in the face of injustice. Caleb walked beside her in silence for a while, his presence steady and reassuring. "Tomorrow is a new day," he said finally, "and we'll face it the same way we faced today together if you want. I think I'm ready for whatever comes next." She had learned to stand tall, to seek help when needed, and to recognize the courage in others as well as herself. And as the sun disappeared behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Leela Redfeather knew that she had taken the first steps toward a future where dignity, courage, and hope could guide her through even the darkest moments. The next morning, Cedar Creek awoke under a pale golden sunrise. The town seemed quieter than usual, as if it too was holding its breath after the events of the past 2 days. Leela Redfeather rose early, her small cabin filled with the gentle light of dawn. She had barely slept, thinking about the challenges she had faced and the lessons she had learned. But she also felt a quiet excitement, a hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Today was a new day, full of possibilities. She prepared her baskets carefully, inspecting each one for imperfections. Her fingers were nimble and sure, the result of years of practice and dedication. Leela's mother watched silently from the doorway, pride shining in her eyes. "You've grown stronger," she said softly. "I can see it in the way you carry yourself." Merchants were calling out their goods, children laughed and ran between stalls, and the smell of fresh bread and roasting coffee filled the air. Leela set up her stall with care, arranging her baskets to catch the attention of passing townspeople. She felt a sense of calm confidence, knowing that she could handle whatever the day might bring. Caleb Dawson arrived soon after, his wide-brimmed hat shading his face as he tipped it in greeting. "Morning, Leela," he said. "Ready for another day." Leela's skill and the beauty of her baskets attracted attention, and she found herself selling more than she had in days. Her confidence grew with every transaction, and she realized that she no longer feared the judgmental eyes of others. She had learned to trust herself, and that trust gave her a quiet power. But just as she began to feel completely at ease, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the market. Sheriff Clayton. His expression was stormy, his pride clearly bruised from previous encounters. He walked through the market, glancing at stalls and people with the same gruff manner he always had, but there was a subtle change in his behavior. He seemed cautious, aware that the townspeople were no longer willing to accept his arrogance without question. Leela felt her heart tighten, but this time she did not step back. She stood tall, her hands steady as she arranged her baskets. Caleb, sensing her tension, stepped slightly closer, his presence a reassuring shield. The sheriff approached, stopping just a few feet away. "Back again, I see," he said, his voice tense. "Selling your baskets and making people stare." And the townspeople agree that what happened before was unfair. She realized that she was no longer alone, that she had the support of not only Caleb but also the townspeople who had begun to recognize her worth. She lifted her chin and met the sheriff's gaze with quiet determination. "You cannot make me feel small," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I have worked hard, and I will continue to do so. You cannot take that from me." People approached Leela's stall, some with apologies for the way they had reacted before, others with compliments on her courage and skill. Leela smiled politely, accepting their words with quiet dignity. She realized that the town had changed, that people's hearts could be moved by courage, honesty, and kindness. Caleb stood nearby, giving her a small nod of approval. "See," he said softly. "Courage can make a difference. You're capable of more than you realize." Walking together toward the outskirts of town, Leela felt a sense of peace she had not known before. The fear and humiliation of the past days had been replaced with confidence, courage, and a sense of possibility. She realized that life would always have challenges, but she now had the strength to face them. "You've changed a lot in just a few days," Caleb said, his voice warm. "You've faced fear, stood up to injustice, and gained the respect of those around you. That's something not everyone can do. And you've shown me that even small acts of courage can make a big difference. You've reminded me why I stand for others." Leela felt a sense of hope settle over her, knowing that challenges would come, but that she now had the courage and support to face them. As they reached the edge of Cedar Creek, Leela paused and looked back at the town. The streets were calm now, the market empty, and the wooden buildings bathed in the soft light of dusk. She felt proud of herself, proud of the courage she had discovered, and grateful for the support Caleb had given her. I think I can handle whatever comes next," she said softly. "You will," Caleb replied, smiling, "and I'll be around just in case you need a friend." She realized that life was full of challenges, but it was also full of kindness, courage, and the possibility of change. People could grow, towns could grow, and she could grow as well. That night, as Leela returned home, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had faced humiliation, danger, and fear, and she had emerged stronger. The lessons she had learned over the past days were more valuable than any material reward. Courage, dignity, kindness, and the understanding that support from others could help her overcome even the toughest obstacles. In the days that followed, Leela's reputation in Cedar Creek grew. People began to treat her with respect, recognizing her skill, her courage, and her determination. The sheriff, humbled by his own actions and the quiet defiance of the townspeople, began to behave with more caution, aware that his authority was no longer unquestioned. Leela continued to sell her baskets, each one a symbol of her perseverance and determination. Caleb remained a friend and mentor, offering guidance and support when needed, but never overshadowing her independence. Together, they had changed the town in small but meaningful ways, showing that courage and kindness could influence even the most stubborn hearts. As the sun set each evening, painting the sky with brilliant colors, Leela would often pause and think about the journey she had taken. She had learned that life could be difficult and unfair, but that dignity, courage, and the support of friends could make even the hardest challenges manageable. She had discovered her own strength and the power of standing up for what was right. And so Cedar Creek continued on, a little brighter, a little kinder, and a little braver, thanks in part to a young native girl who refused to be humiliated and a cowboy who stood by her side. Together, they had reminded everyone that courage could take many forms and that even small acts of bravery could change the world. Leela Redfeather went to bed that night with a heart full of hope, knowing that tomorrow was another day to face the world with courage, kindness, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone.